Today we confront an event that demands our full attention. News is emerging that Qatar has launched a massive strike on Israel's Ashdod power plant, and the implications of this act are far-reaching. When a nation's energy infrastructure is attacked, the impact goes beyond physical destruction. It reverberates across society, the economy, and geopolitics. Ashdod is not merely a city, it is a hub of industrial, commercial, and civilian activity. By targeting its power plant, Qatar has struck at the very lifeblood of daily life, and in doing so, has challenged Israel's sense of security, resilience, and strategic dominance. Consider the first hook. Israel has long been seen as the military and technological fortress of the Middle East. Advanced missile defense systems, elite intelligence networks, and sophisticated cyber capabilities have projected an image of invulnerability. Yet a single strike, strategically aimed at critical infrastructure, exposes vulnerabilities that no system of walls, radars, or drones can fully protect. The Ashdod attack serves as a stark reminder that in modern conflict, infrastructure is as much a battlefield as the front lines. Qatar's bold strike on Israel's Ashdod power plant has become more than just a military event. It is a historic turning point that demands careful consideration. For decades, Qatar has been seen primarily as a wealthy Gulf state, relying on its vast natural gas reserves, playing the role of mediator in regional disputes, and projecting influence through diplomacy, media, and financial leverage. Yet, this attack marks a new chapter, one in which Qatar steps out from behind the scenes and enters the theater of direct confrontation. The choice of target is as revealing as the strike itself. Attacking a power plant is not a random act of violence, it is a calculated political and military statement. It says, in effect, we understand where your vulnerabilities lie, and we are prepared to expose them. This alone makes the strike a bold escalation that forces the world to reassess Qatar's position in the regional balance of power. Why is this so significant? Consider this: Israel, with its advanced missile defense systems, intelligence apparatus, and military dominance, has long been seen as nearly untouchable in the Middle East. For Qatar, a small state with a fraction of Israel's population and military resources, to target a critical facility inside Israel represents a direct challenge to that perception of invulnerability. It is the kind of move that shakes confidence not only inside Israel but also among its allies, particularly the United States. It sends a clear signal. Israel's security is not absolute, and even a small nation with determination and resources can pierce its armor. That message reverberates across the region, emboldening some and alarming others. Now let's add another hook. The attack is not only about Israel, it is about Qatar's evolving identity. For years, Qatar has invested heavily in soft power, hosting international sporting events like the World Cup, financing global media outlets like Al Jazeera, and presenting itself as a modern, progressive Gulf state. But with this strike, Qatar demonstrates that it is willing to shift from soft influence to hard power when it sees fit. This transformation is not just about one attack, it is about a nation positioning itself as a major actor in shaping the trajectory of Middle Eastern conflicts. That shift has consequences far beyond Israel's borders. Economically, the strike highlights the irony of a state built on energy wealth attacking another state's energy infrastructure. It reflects an understanding that energy is not just fuel, it is lifeblood. By hitting Ashdod's power plant, Qatar struck at the heart of Israel's ability to sustain its economy and its population. Power plants are not symbolic in the abstract, they are the foundation of modern life. Hospitals, industries, communication networks all depend on electricity. By targeting such a facility, Qatar aimed not merely to damage a building, but to disrupt an entire system of daily functioning, creating a psychological impact that goes beyond the blast zone. And let us not underestimate the global ripple effect. This act will not be viewed in isolation by neighboring states. Nations like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey are watching closely, recalculating their strategies in light of Qatar's boldness. Global powers, too, will be forced to reconsider. The United States, already deeply entangled in Middle Eastern conflicts, cannot ignore an attack that threatens its closest ally in the region. Europe, grappling with its dependence on energy imports, and the fragility of its own infrastructure, sees in this event a warning of what might come if conflict spread further. The attack thus transforms from a local strike into an international message. The boldness of Qatar's action lies not just in what was done, but in how it redefines expectations. It challenges assumptions about power in the Middle East, undermines the myth of absolute security, and raises urgent questions about what comes next. Will Israel retaliate with overwhelming force? Will Qatar double down on its aggressive posture? Or will this spark new alignments and coalitions across the region? These are the uncertainties that make this event so consequential. And as history shows us, moments of uncertainty are often the sparks that ignite larger fires. The choice of target in Qatar's attack on Israel's Ashdod power plant reveals far more than the immediate destruction it caused. This was not simply about launching rockets or sending a military message. It was about striking at the heart of Israel's stability and shaking the psychological foundation of its people. Infrastructure is the nervous system of any modern state, and power plants are its beating heart. Without electricity, daily life grinds to a halt. Hospitals lose the ability to save lives, industries cannot produce goods, communications are disrupted, and ordinary families are left in darkness. By deliberately hitting a facility that sustains all of these functions, Qatar demonstrated that modern warfare is no longer about territory alone, it is about crippling the systems that make life possible. That choice was symbolic, and it was designed to create fear and uncertainty far greater than the physical damage itself. Think about the hook here. Israel has prided itself on being a fortress state, protected by advanced defense systems and unrivaled military strength. Yet what does it mean when a single strike on a power plant exposes vulnerabilities that military hardware cannot easily shield? The symbolic power of this attack lies in showing that even the most secure nations can be destabilized not by direct clashes with armies, but by blows to the essential infrastructure that underpins their survival. That realization forces Israelis to confront a troubling truth. The enemy does not need to march across borders or topple cities to cause chaos. It needs only to identify the fragile points of everyday life. The symbolism also extends to the regional and global audience. Israel's adversaries see this as proof that the myth of invulnerability can be pierced, and they will draw lessons from it. Striking a power plant is not just about Israel, it is a statement to the entire world that no system, however sophisticated, is immune to targeted disruption. In this sense, Qatar's action operates on two levels: the physical destruction of energy infrastructure and the psychological warfare of reminding both citizens and leaders that their sense of security is more fragile than they believed. At the same time, for Israel's allies, particularly the United States, the symbolism carries another weight. The attack calls into question the effectiveness of years of investment in defense cooperation, intelligence sharing, and technological upgrades. If such an essential facility can be struck despite those protections, then what else lies within reach? For policymakers in Washington, London, and Brussels, this attack highlights the dangers of a new era where wars are fought not only with armies in deserts or skies, but with strikes that destabilize the functioning of entire nations. Let us not overlook how this affects the Israeli public. When a military base is attacked, citizens can still distance themselves emotionally, thinking of it as part of a distant battlefield. But when the lights flicker out in their own homes, when hospitals sound alarms because backup generators must be activated, when businesses shut down due to power cuts, that is when fear becomes personal. That is when war enters the living room and confidence in leadership begins to erode. This is precisely the psychological shock that Qatar's strike was designed to deliver. There is another hook here, one that makes this attack particularly striking: energy itself as the currency of Qatar's power. The irony is impossible to ignore. A nation that built its wealth on natural gas exports and uses that wealth to project global influence chose to attack the energy lifeline of another state. In doing so, Qatar was effectively declaring that energy is not just a commodity to be traded, it is a weapon that can be wielded in conflict. This reframing of energy as both wealth and weapon is a deeply symbolic gesture, reminding the world that in the geopolitics of the 21st century, pipelines and power plants may matter as much as tanks and missiles. The targeting of Israel's Ashdod power plant will be remembered not only for the destruction it caused, but for the symbolism it carries. It forces us to recognize that infrastructure is the new front line of global conflict, and that striking it delivers a message louder than any battlefield victory. Qatar's action turned a power plant into a stage, and on that stage, it performed a message of defiance, fragility, and the shifting nature of war. The Ashdod power plant strike is more than a single attack. It is a signal of regional escalation that shifts the balance of power in the Middle East in ways that are impossible to ignore. For decades, Israel has projected itself as the central military power in the region, backed by U.S. support and technological superiority, while smaller Gulf states like Qatar have relied on wealth, diplomacy, and quiet influence rather than direct confrontation. What makes this attack extraordinary is that Qatar, a country often described as punching above its weight in global affairs, has now chosen to step into the arena of open military confrontation with Israel. That choice alters the strategic landscape and forces every regional actor to reconsider its assumptions about power, alliances, and vulnerability. The hook here is simple yet explosive. If Qatar can strike Israel, who else might be emboldened to follow? This is not just about one Gulf state making a bold move. It is about the signal it sends to Iran, Turkey, Hezbollah, and other regional players that Israel can be directly targeted in ways that matter. The ripple effects of this escalation are already spreading across the Middle East. Countries that once assumed Israel's deterrent capabilities would prevent such strikes must now face a different reality, one in which infrastructure, trade routes, and even civilian hubs could be targeted by adversaries willing to take risks. This escalation also reshapes the political dynamics between Israel and its Arab neighbors. For years, Qatar positioned itself as a mediator in conflicts, hosting peace talks and maintaining relations with both Western powers and regional movements like Hamas. By taking the step of attacking Israeli infrastructure, Qatar effectively sheds the role of neutral broker and embraces the identity of an active participant in the conflict. That transformation forces other Arab states to recalibrate. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, which have all wrestled with their relationships to Israel, will now have to decide whether to condemn Qatar, support its boldness, or remain cautiously silent. Each choice carries risks, and the attack makes neutrality harder to sustain. Another dimension to this escalation is the impact on U.S. strategy in the region. Washington has relied on Qatar as both a host for major U.S. military bases and as a partner in diplomatic and economic initiatives, yet by directly targeting Israel, Qatar has put itself at odds with America's closest ally in the Middle East. This creates a dilemma for U.S. policymakers. Can they continue to treat Qatar as a reliable partner while it challenges Israel so aggressively? Or will they be forced to take sides in a way that could unravel years of delicate balancing? This is precisely the kind of escalation that complicates superpower strategies and creates openings for rivals like Russia and China to insert themselves more deeply into the region's affairs. The symbolic nature of this escalation cannot be overstated. In the Middle East, perception often matters as much as reality. The perception now is that Israel's security is not absolute, and that small states with determination and resources can force Israel onto the defensive. That perception emboldens resistance groups and complicates Israel's deterrent strategy. And here lies another hook: escalation rarely stays contained. Once one actor shows that it is willing to cross a line, others may test where the next line lies. The Ashdod strike is therefore not the end of an episode. It is the opening of a chapter whose ending no one can predict. In a region where rivalries are fierce, alliances are fragile, and conflicts often spill over borders, Qatar's decision to strike a power plant in Israel is a dangerous escalation that sets the stage for wider instability. It challenges the status quo, provokes reassessment by every actor involved, and makes clear that the conflicts of the Middle East are entering a more volatile, unpredictable phase. The Ashdod attack may well be remembered as the moment when a regional confrontation began to transform into something larger, riskier, and far more consequential. The global repercussions of Qatar's strike on Israel's Ashdod power plant stretch far beyond the borders of the Middle East, and it is here where the true magnitude of this attack begins to unfold. Wars in today's world are no longer contained within geography, they spill over into markets, trade routes, financial systems, and even the psychology of distant nations. By targeting such a vital piece of infrastructure, Qatar has sent shockwaves into the veins of the global economy, reminding the world that regional conflicts can destabilize energy security and international order in ways few are prepared for. The immediate destruction may be local, but the message is global. No nation is immune when infrastructure becomes a weapon. The hook, and perhaps the most urgent lesson, lies in energy markets. Ashdod is not just another city, it is a critical hub for Israel's energy supply and a gateway for maritime trade. Disruption in such a place forces speculation in oil and gas prices, creating ripples that affect global supply chains. Traders in London, New York, and Singapore react almost instantly, and their reactions translate into higher energy costs for households from Europe to Asia. The world is already grappling with instability in energy markets, and an attack like this fans the flames of uncertainty. This demonstrates how one strike in a seemingly distant conflict can reach directly into the pockets of ordinary families thousands of miles away. Another layer of global consequence emerges when we consider trade and shipping. Israel's coastline is a lifeline for its imports and exports, and Ashdod plays a central role in maintaining that lifeline. A strike on infrastructure so close to a port city raises alarms for international shipping companies, insurers, and investors. If power plants, ports, or refineries are seen as vulnerable targets, global trade routes that pass through the eastern Mediterranean will face new risks. Ships may be diverted, insurance premiums will spike, and regional ports may lose traffic as instability grows. Once again, what begins as a regional escalation becomes a disruption with global economic significance. The political reverberations are no less striking. Europe, still haunted by its dependence on external energy suppliers, cannot afford another source of uncertainty. For countries like Germany, Italy, and France, the attack underscores just how fragile the global energy network has become and how vulnerable their economies are to conflicts they do not control. In Washington, policymakers face a different challenge. The United States has invested billions in ensuring Israel's security, yet a Gulf state has demonstrated that critical infrastructure remains exposed. This is not only an embarrassment, it is a strategic headache. How can Washington continue to reassure allies of its protective power when the vulnerabilities are so clearly visible? The attack also opens the door for rival global powers to exploit the situation. Russia, already positioning itself as a defender of alternative alliances in the Middle East, can use this escalation to argue that U.S. influence is waning and that new partnerships must be forged. China, too, with its hunger for stable energy supplies, will be watching closely, calculating how instability in the Middle East can either harm its growth or provide opportunities for greater involvement in regional diplomacy and trade. Perhaps the most powerful hook here is psychological. Global publics are reminded that wars in the Middle East are never just over there. They ripple outward, destabilizing economies, reshaping alliances, and creating uncertainty for billions of people. A household in Paris may not feel the heat of an explosion in Ashdod, but it will feel the sting of a higher electricity bill. A shipping company in Singapore may not hear the sirens, but it will feel the risk in rising insurance costs. This interconnectedness makes the attack on Ashdod a global event, not a regional one. Qatar's decision to hit Israel's power infrastructure has therefore rewritten the script. It was not simply a missile strike, it was a calculated move that destabilized energy markets, shook international trade, tested alliances, and gave rival powers new openings. In doing so, it has reminded the world of a truth too often ignored, that the front lines of modern conflict run through stock exchanges, fuel depots, and household budgets just as surely as they do through battlefields. Israel's response to Qatar's strike on the Ashdod power plant is now the focal point of both regional and global attention, and it carries stakes that go far beyond immediate retaliation. For Israel, the attack is not merely a violation of its territory, it is a direct challenge to its national security, its strategic credibility, and the confidence of its citizens. Every decision Israel now makes will be closely observed, not only by neighboring states but by allies like the United States, whose military and diplomatic support has long underwritten Israel's sense of security. The pressure to respond decisively is immense, because hesitation could be interpreted as weakness, emboldening not only Qatar but other actors who may be calculating the limits of Israel's tolerance. Here is the first hook. Israel's military planners face an unprecedented dilemma. The nation is highly advanced in its intelligence gathering, air defenses, and cyber capabilities, yet a single strike on critical infrastructure has already exposed vulnerabilities that could invite further attacks. Retaliating too aggressively risks widening the conflict and drawing in regional powers like Iran or Lebanon's Hezbollah, while responding too cautiously risks signaling that even a small Gulf state can act with impunity. Every step, every calculation is now under scrutiny, and the pressure is amplified by the media and public opinion, both domestically and internationally. Another compelling hook lies in the psychological dimension. Strikes on military bases or border positions can be framed as battlefield engagements, but attacks on infrastructure hit civilians directly, making the population acutely aware of vulnerability. Hospitals, schools, and essential services depend on power, and disruption creates panic, uncertainty, and fear. Israel's leadership must manage the response not only to neutralize the immediate threat, but also to maintain morale among its citizens, who will demand swift and visible action. Public sentiment is a powerful force in shaping the scale, intensity, and timing of any retaliatory operation. Israel's response also carries broader regional implications. Neighboring Arab states are watching carefully, as are Gulf powers like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, who must consider their own strategic calculations in light of Qatar's bold action. Each decision Israel makes will influence regional diplomacy, alliances, and the balance of deterrence. For example, a heavy-handed military response could alienate moderate Arab states that have recently moved toward normalized relations, while a restrained response might encourage more aggressive tactics from adversaries. Israel's leadership is therefore caught in a high-stakes balancing act that could redefine the region's geopolitical landscape. A further hook lies in the potential for cyber and asymmetric warfare. Israel has long invested in cyber capabilities to defend critical infrastructure, but Qatar's strike demonstrates that physical attacks remain potent and disruptive. The combination of conventional and unconventional strategies now comes into play. Israel must anticipate not only immediate retaliatory strikes but also potential attacks on water systems, communications networks, and other critical nodes. Every defensive move requires foresight, innovation, and careful calibration because miscalculations can have cascading consequences. Finally, Israel's response will shape the global perception of deterrence. The United States and other allies have consistently emphasized Israel's security as a cornerstone of regional stability. If Israel responds effectively, it reinforces the credibility of its military and the strength of alliances. If it struggles to respond, it sends a signal to other nations and non-state actors that strategic attacks on infrastructure can bypass conventional defenses. This is not merely about a single strike, it is about reshaping the strategic calculus for both friends and adversaries in the Middle East and beyond. Israel now faces a critical moment where every decision, every action, and every communication will have ramifications far beyond Ashdod. Its response will define deterrence, influence regional alliances, shape public perception, and signal to the world how nations can defend themselves in an era where infrastructure has become both a target and a weapon. The attack on Ashdod power plant underscores a deeper lesson about the fragility of military dominant strategies and the evolving nature of modern warfare, where infrastructure has become both a target and a battlefield. For decades, Israel's security doctrine emphasized military superiority, advanced intelligence, and technological dominance as the ultimate guarantors of national safety. Yet the strike demonstrates that no matter how sophisticated a state's defenses may be, critical vulnerabilities remain. The lesson is stark: conventional military might cannot fully protect a nation if its essential systems, power grids, water supplies, transportation networks, can be disrupted by a determined adversary. This is the new reality of warfare, and it has implications not only for Israel but for nations around the world. Here is a hook to consider: traditional wars focused on armies, borders, and population centers, but today, an attack on a single power plant can achieve what massed forces could not, paralyzing daily life, undermining public confidence, and forcing political leaders into reactive positions. Infrastructure strikes are disproportionately impactful compared to their cost and complexity, making them an attractive tool for smaller nations or non-state actors seeking influence against stronger powers. Qatar's choice to target Ashdod reflects a sophisticated understanding of this principle, signaling that the age of kinetic battles is giving way to an era where disruption of critical systems can shift the balance of power. Another critical hook is psychological. The targeting of infrastructure transforms the nature of fear and security. Military bases and checkpoints are expected targets in conflict, but power plants, water treatment facilities, and communication hubs are intimate parts of citizens' daily lives. By attacking these systems, aggressors bypass traditional front lines and strike at the heart of civilian stability, creating a pervasive sense of vulnerability. In doing so, they force governments to allocate resources toward protecting infrastructure as rigorously as they defend borders, fundamentally altering strategic priorities. The attack also demonstrates the limits of deterrence. Israel's military strength has long been considered a shield against aggression, yet the strike on Ashdod exposes that technological sophistication alone cannot guarantee invulnerability. This is a lesson for all nations reliant on military dominance to secure their safety. The calculation now must account not only for armies in the field, but for the resilience of essential systems, the adaptability of adversaries, and the potential for asymmetric tactics to disrupt even the most fortified states. Economically, the lesson is equally profound. Infrastructure is not merely functional, it is a backbone of national productivity. When it is disrupted, economic activity stalls, supply chains falter, and investor confidence wavers. Qatar's attack on Ashdod sends a warning that the economic and psychological impacts of infrastructure strikes can amplify political and military objectives. States must recognize that protecting power grids, ports, and communication networks is no longer optional. It is a core element of national security strategy. Finally, the strike highlights the evolving interplay between technology, strategy, and political signaling. In the past, military dominance was about brute force. Today, it requires anticipating vulnerabilities in complex systems and understanding the symbolic weight of targets. The Ashdod attack is a case study in how a smaller actor can leverage knowledge, precision, and strategic insight to challenge a stronger opponent. This is a world where thinking beyond traditional military paradigms is not a luxury but a necessity, and where the lessons of one strike can redefine how nations prepare for conflict in the 21st century. In closing, let us remember that moments like this are more than breaking news. They are a lens through which we can study power, strategy, and consequence. The attack on Ashdod is a reminder that modern conflict is as much about systems and symbols as it is about borders. It challenges us to think critically about security, infrastructure, and the interconnectedness of our world. Israel has been shaken, yes, but the lessons extend far beyond its borders, offering all of us insight into the evolving nature of conflict in the 21st century.